Welcome back, everybody. I'm Naha, and this is 30 Days of Tarot. Today is the 22nd, and as you know, the name of my school, 22 Teachings, this is definitely a special day. So we're going to open up a couple of decks today, and we're going to have a little bit of a tarot history lesson. And I've shared with you already on this series some of the history that comes down to us through some of the French occultists, Papus and Eliphas Levi, Eudes Picard, especially as they influenced decks that were coming out in the more Kabbalistic vein of things. But today we're going to include in this series some history of one of the most important parts of the world in the history of tarot, and that, of course, is Italy. Now, the decks that we're going to be looking at, the first one I received in a box from a friend, and it looked like this, wrapped up. And as I opened it, I didn't even know it was going to be a deck, so that's why it's already been taken out of its package. But when I saw what it was, I was very, very excited. So this is the Soprafino Tarot, and this comes from one of the most important modern Italian producers of tarot decks based in Milan, and that is the publishing house of Menenghello. Their works are instantly recognizable as they come in these beautiful handmade boxes. And oftentimes you see a wax seal here. We don't see that on this edition, but they are limited edition decks. This one happens to say made in Italy for Cavallini and Company, San Francisco. So I'm not sure if this is the regular edition. And I'm not sure where my friend found this, but this is actually the first Menenghello deck that I own. So I am so excited to open it with you and share it. And this happens to be, of course, we see the world on the front there, one of what I consider to be the most beautiful in the lineage of the old Italian decks. And there is so much history there and so many decks that have come out from Italy, especially in the 15 and 1600s. And all of that is outlined in volume 2 of Kaplan's Tarot Encyclopedia. This is almost completely dedicated to all of the Italian tarots. And what you'll find is that as you go through the imagery here, and these are mostly 18th and 19th century, that we have all of these decks which look very similar to the Marseille decks. And at first glance you might say these just look like the same deck over and over again. It's subtle nuances, it's different publishers and artists over the years that have done their take on this Marseille style and pip deck, and of course reproduced to this day. And oftentimes those Marseille decks, they have the block printing with red and yellow and blue. It's very classic, and different printers and artists over the years changed the colors as well as the details. This deck in particular went where the previous decks had not gone. And as we look, the little fold out, and this card which says, this tarot originates from 1830 when Fernando Gubenberg, one of the most ingenious innovators of playing cards, commissioned Carlo Dellarocca to redesign the classic 78 count deck. Each card was delicately colored by hand, earning the deck its name, Soprafino, which means very refined. Today the deck has been reproduced by Osvaldo Menegazzi of Milan, Italy, in a limited edition of 2,000 sets, each deck coming, as I said, with a handmade box and including 78 cards. So I have seen shows and documentaries on this publishing house, Menenghello, in Milan. And this artist, Osvaldo Menegazzi, has made so many amazing, beautiful decks, has taken these classic Italian decks and hand painted them and reproduced them. Just really, really beautiful work. And it's something that you, as my audience, if you live in Europe or other places in the world, you might be well aware of this publishing company, of Osvaldo, of these kinds of decks. But here in the United States, this is actually something very rare and not seen very often. So For those of you who are my US audience, I think that you may be seeing this for the first time, and I'm also going to be sharing with you where you can find some of these decks and some European websites that actually do ship to the US. And as beautiful as these decks are, they're actually not expensive, especially when you compare it with some of the prices of the decks that are coming out today, especially the independently printed decks. So if you want to get your hands on a Meninghello deck, it's absolutely possible. But let's just go ahead and start taking a look at these. Now they are on thick cardstock. This is the backs. And we start here with Il Matto, the Fool. He has the M on his back as Matto. And these are the kind of details that you would see that would differentiate this deck from others, but it's really the coloring of this deck and the details that make this stand out more than any prior Italian decks. And as you can see, these cards are square. Look at this gorgeous High Priestess. Isn't the color just amazing? And the rounded corners on tarot cards and on playing cards in general did not become a thing until the late 1800s. And so prior to that, you just saw cards with these square corners. And sometimes, and as this deck was originally printed, the back would have been printed on a very thin piece of paper, glued, and then the edges folded over here. Of course, we can have double-sided printing today. And these cards are all hand cut. They're not machine cut. So when you line them all up, they don't line up perfectly. And I think there's something kind of special about that. There's just these little kind of imperfections about them that just show you how they are handmade. And I just find them to be so rich and so beautiful. So I'm going to show you a couple more of these, and then we're going to take a look in the Tarot Encyclopedia. And as I was looking it up and I was looking up Soprafino, I thought, well, this deck absolutely must be in here. La Forza, Strength. And I was surprised when I couldn't find this in the index. As I was searching for it, I had to just end up going through the images, and it was one particular card that stands out to me, and this is actually the first time that I had seen this deck when I was doing some research online. Let's go ahead and get to it. There's Temperance, El Diablo, the Tower, and it's this card, the Star. So I was doing, I think I was actually writing a tarot lesson or writing my newsletter where I include the tarot lessons, and I was talking about Aquarius. Now Aquarius is the zodiac sign that corresponds to the card, the Star, and I had run across this image and I just thought that it was one of the most beautiful depictions of the Star that I had ever seen. She has her owl there, and just the depth of the card, you know, especially when you're used to seeing cards that have a very sort of two-dimensional look to the artwork. Even this beam of the star that's coming down here just feels like it's coming, it's almost like straight at you, right? And so that was the card I was looking for when I was looking at the images in this book, and I ended up finding the deck. However, it's not in here called the Soprafino. It's called the Gutenberg Lombardi Tarot, circa 1823 to 1840. And it says here, these designs engraved by C. Dellarocca, so I knew that that was the same artist, as evidenced by inscription on the pedestal of the King of Batons, and published by Gutenberg of Milan, so coming from the same city as the modern-day printer and publisher of these cards. The cards are delicately colored by hand with more than 12 colors and soft shades. The majors and court cards with full-length figures and Italian titles. The tax stamp on the King of Batons was valid from 1823 to 1840, and it's by the tax stamp that we're able to date these old decks and at least get a range of when they would have originated from. It also speaks of a reprint of the Lombardi Tarot issued in 1981 by Vito Arienti of Edizioni del Soleone, limited in an edition of 500 sets for the US and 2,000 sets for the rest of the world. And believe me, I have searched for that deck, and it's something that's pretty rare, but maybe someday I will be able to get one. But let's go ahead and look a little bit further at these. And I just think that they are so beautiful. You have some discolorations, some dyes here, and this is all just part of it, part of this very special handmade deck. I think it's interesting in this judgment. We see these people, rather than in, for instance, a Rider-Waite-Smith deck where the people down below are just joyously with their arms in the air. Here we see people almost looking quite terrified at this angel blowing its trumpet, right? Here we see just a gorgeous, rich depiction of the world again. And now we get into the minor cards. And you will see that these look very much like the classic pip style cards of the Marseille. But it's the coloring of these, this nice pink and blue and yellow here. So these are the wands. And we won't go through each individual one there. And in these style of decks, it's always the aces that just really grab me. I mean, look at that gorgeous Ace of Cups. And again, it's so three-dimensional, you know, compared to other decks. There is the 2. Here is the Ace of Swords with the crown and the classic palm frond on one side and the olive branch on the other. And we can tell the difference between the swords and the wands because the swords are curved and the wands are straight. So sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to instantly recognize if you're not used to working with these pip style cards, which is which. But just remember the wands are straight and the swords, they're like scimitars. They're curved blades. Here are a few more of those. And let's take a look at the pentacles. There's the ace and the 2. And sometimes it's in the discs or pentacles that we can see an indicator of the artist or publisher. But as we read in the book, it said that it was on the King of Batons, the King of Wands, that we should be able to find this information. And here it is. So first I'll show you the first 3 court cards from the family of wands. There we see them. Those wands, the batons, those are just big clubs, aren't they? So here we see the King of Wands. And in this reproduction, we see down at the bottom, it says, Fab di Gupenberg Milano, right here. And then on his disc here, it is the tax stamp, and it says Lombardia. So we do know this is what was originally called the Lombardi Tarot. And I'm guessing that the reason why maybe this publishing house that did the reproduction decided to change it and not call it the Lombardi Tarot is because other decks came out by that name, later decks, which they've also reproduced. And Lombardy is the name of the region there. It's a region of northern Italy, and its capital is Milan. And geographically, it's just a beautiful place of mountains and rivers and lakes. And of course, we know Milan to be the great cultural capital known for its fashion. But also in this day and age, Lombardy is one of the richest regions of all of Europe. Just beautiful in all of these cards, aren't they? Now, this Lombardy region has prehistoric petroglyphs that date all the way back to 8,000 BC. Can you imagine that artists were creating there 10,000 years ago? No wonder we have these important symbols that come down from this part of the world. So I was just so excited to receive this deck. And now that I'm really getting a chance to look at it in person after just having seen it online, it's just even more beautiful than I had expected. Now, there's another deck that I want to show you. And that is one that's published by Lo Scarabeo. And this is called the Ancient Italian Tarot. And from what I can see, these are the same images. So I believe this to also be a reproduction deck, also made in Italy, but not in Milan. And this deck is readily available. So I ordered this a while ago, and I can't remember where I got it from. It might have just come from Amazon. but it's definitely something that you can still get your hands on. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And of course, right off the bat, we see that there's just quite a size difference. And it says Ancient Italian Tarots here on the title card. And after feeling the richness of these cards and the paper that they're printed on, something is definitely lost when I feel just the standard, regular old playing card stock, right? There we see the Fool again. And the reproduction here is nowhere near as stunning, and the colors nowhere near as rich as on Meneghello deck, but it's definitely still beautiful imagery. But there's just a great difference in something that is just mass produced and printed on a machine than something that is really carefully hand printed. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these side by side. And wow, you know, I was wrong. These are not identical because look at the Emperor. Now, at first glance, they look the same. You want to play that little game, notice the differences? Well, it's obvious right off the bat. You can see that this Emperor has a beard and this one doesn't. Is there anything else different that you guys notice? You can see the delicate coloring here with the pink and the red, and here it's just all red. You see a little bit of a difference in the design here. So this region of northern Italy, Lombardy, was settled by 2000 BC. And it was the Germanic Lombards who gave the region its name, as they arrived in the year 570 and they ruled for 200 years. And by the 15th century, Milan was a major political, economic, and military force in Europe. And of course, it was a center for the Renaissance. There we can see the hermit. Do you see the difference? Look at the lantern. Here he's holding a lantern, as you might expect. But here, you can see that he's holding some other kind of little device that has a flame. Maybe some kind of old-fashioned oil lamp here. It's hard for me to say. During the Renaissance, Milan was actually ruled by the Visconti family, a name which might sound familiar to you in tarot history, and later by the House of Sforza, which also has decks named after it. And Italy at the time didn't even exist. It was called the Kingdom of Sardinia. And by the 16th century, France and Austria were both battling over this land, and certain areas came under the control of Spain, and the Valtellina Valley came under the possession of the old Swiss Confederacy. And then in the 1600s, the area was afflicted with plague. And not only did that halt any further development, it also really impacted the area. It was quite a tower. And here's the star. And actually, this really beautiful card, I feel, is done justice by this rendition. I do think that this is very lovely. I love this color of blue here. But you can see it just does not have the fine art feel of this card. And it just feels a little bit more raw and a little bit lower grade. But still beautiful. So in the early 1700s, Austria gained control over this region, and they helped to strengthen it once more and kind of helped this region to recover after dealing with the plague. And they brought some economic stability to the region. And then later in the 18th century, Napoleon arrived with the French army, and he became the head of state of the capital of Milan. Valtellina was taken back from Switzerland, and the struggle for power continued until the Second Italian War of Independence, during which the French Empire and the Kingdom of Sardinia fought against Austria, regained control, which was formed in 1861. So all of that took place after the creation of this deck. Well, the other deck. Let's take a look at the Ace of Cups, because this is not the same. So here we see absolute difference in those two depictions. This one with its curved lines almost feels like it has more of an Asian influence. So you guys know that I love history, and I just find it fascinating to think of what was going on in this region during the time that these decks were originally being created. And just to think of the power struggle going back and forth and what it must have been like to live through that time and then to come through it and to regain some kind of a sense of unity within your country. Let's take a look at the Ace of Pentacles there. This one says, Cartiera Italiana Serravalle-Sesia. And let's take a look at that King of Batons, that King of Wands, and see what they've done in the Lo Scarabeo version. Oh, well, this is interesting. Okay, so remember him. Now, this is where we saw the original tax stamp, and we saw the publisher, Gutenberg. And actually, I'm now noticing a detail that I didn't see before. Right here, it's very small. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but right underneath this disc, it actually has the signature of the artist. It says C. Dellarocca. So all of that information is here. Look at the Lo Scarabeo version. It's just missing completely. And not only that, he's grown a beard. So I'm going to take a look in the book and see what they have to say for themselves. Okay, so not much is said at all in here before they just get into the meanings of the cards. It simply has a brief history on the origin of tarots and that they can be traced back to 15th century Italy and potentially back to Egyptian. It even mentions here esoteric orders, among them the Golden Dawn. Now, I love the Golden Dawn, but they don't have anything to do with this deck. This deck is early 1800s, and the Golden Dawn was end of the 19th century. So there's no indicator here that I can see of Lombardi, Soprafino, Dellarocca, or Gutenberg. So I don't know, I feel kind of weird about that. Do you guys think that's kind of strange? I mean, this is an Italian-based publishing company, but I don't know if it's for legal reasons that they just couldn't say, but you know, they've clearly taken the imagery from that, changed a few things, added some beards, and reprinted it. Now, I think it's great that we have the imagery and that it's available, but if I was you, I would go ahead and look for one of these gorgeous Meneghello decks, which you can actually get, and I'll leave these links down below. But there is a website that is tarotbg.eu, and they sell their decks and also a bunch of other decks and some other cool Italian publishers. So look to that website to purchase one of these. And I'm also going to include another website, Arnell Art, who has created a really beautiful and amazing archive about this publishing house and specifically about Osvaldo Menegazzi, the artist. So you guys should go on there and check that out as well. So the only thing left to do is to draw a card. And we are going to use this deck, of course. And I have a feeling that this one may not really stay in my collection. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle these cards. So let's get quiet and still for a second. And while I'm shuffling, let's make our question today about the interaction between us and those whom we'll be encountering. So let's see if we can get some guidance or a good message that can help us in our communication and how we present ourselves in a way that we can be mindful in terms of our interactions with others today. We'll go ahead and cut. Let's set those down and pull our top card. Eight of Cups. Now, because I don't usually read pip style decks, I'm going to first give you my interpretation as I understand the Eight of Cups, which is the card of being willing to walk away. If something is not able to be finished, if something's not able to come to full fruition, being willing to leave that for another day. And I think it's not hard to translate how that might come up with our interactions today, that sometimes things don't need to be pushed to get results. And sometimes it's better to say, you know what, let's just leave things where they are, and we can always come back around and revisit them. Let's see what it says in the little fold out that this came with. Okay, this is only giving us meanings for the major arcana. So there's no minor arcana keywords here. But maybe Lo Scarabeo is going to come through for us after all. So let's see what they have to say about the Eight of Cups. Eight of Chalices, maturity, maturation, modesty, sentimental steadfastness. Interesting. Okay, so this idea of maturity and modesty. It's your day and it's your opportunity to take that message as you will. I think acting mature is definitely a good approach, but I think this sentimental steadfastness, I don't know exactly how that's going to apply. Modesty. Well, I think there's something to be said with all of that and not forcing things. So, thank you guys again so much for being here, for tuning in, for taking a look with me at the Tarot of Lombardy, which is also published as the Tarot Soprafino by the Tarot House of Meneghello, and a version of which is published as the Ancient Italians Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As always, go ahead and leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.